A heartbroken woman loses her home, car, and children after a devastating divorce. But with only $300 and an old food truck, she builds a multi-million-dollar business that leaves her ex-husband speechless when he sees her success on national television. Please subscribe my channel. Before the divorce, Emily's life looked like something out of a dream. Every morning, sunlight poured through the large windows of her beautiful suburban home. The lawn was always green. The family car sat neatly in the driveway. Her 2 children filled the house with laughter, and from the outside, everything seemed perfect. Emily believed she and her husband had built that life together. She had supported him through difficult years. She had helped raise their children. She had sacrificed career opportunities to keep the family strong. But sometimes the life people admire from the outside is already falling apart behind closed doors. The arguments started quietly. Then they became more frequent. Long silences replaced conversations. Cold looks replaced smiles. And one rainy afternoon, everything changed. Her husband walked into the kitchen carrying a folder. Without emotion, without hesitation, he placed it on the table. Divorce papers. Emily stared at the documents as if they belonged to someone else. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. Surely this couldn't be happening. Not after 15 years. Not after everything they had built together. But it was happening. And it was only the beginning. The following months became a nightmare she could never have imagined. Her husband hired expensive attorneys. He used every advantage his money and business connections could provide. Court dates came and went. Arguments filled conference rooms. Documents piled higher and higher. Emily fought with everything she had, but every decision seemed to move against her. Then came the ruling that shattered her world. The house would go to him. The family car would go to him. And primary custody of the children would go to him as well. In a single moment, the foundation of her entire life collapsed. How could everything disappear so quickly? When the judge's decision was finalized, Emily felt as if the air had been pulled from her lungs. She tried to stay strong for her children. She hugged them tightly. She smiled through tears. She promised them she would always love them no matter what. But the moment she was alone, she broke down. That night, she packed her belongings into a few worn suitcases. The home that once echoed with family dinners and birthday celebrations suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every room carried a memory. Every wall reminded her of something she was losing. As she stepped outside for the final time, she looked back at the front door. A chapter of her life was closing forever. A few days later, Emily found herself sleeping on a friend's couch. The woman who once had a comfortable home now owned little more than a few bags of clothes and a small savings account. The silence felt unbearable. The loneliness felt endless. Some nights she cried herself to sleep wondering where everything had gone wrong. Maybe this is the end of the life I knew. But deep inside, beneath the heartbreak and fear, a tiny spark still remained. She couldn't see it clearly yet. She couldn't imagine where it would lead. But that small spark would eventually become the beginning of something extraordinary. Because sometimes life destroys your old story before giving you a better one. Moral: losing everything can become the first step toward finding your true strength. For weeks after the divorce, Emily lived one day at a time. Every morning she woke up on her friend's couch and stared at the ceiling, wondering what she was supposed to do next. The future that once seemed so certain had vanished, leaving behind only fear, uncertainty, and an empty bank account. One afternoon, she opened her banking app and looked at the number on the screen. $300. That was all she had left. $300 to rebuild a life. $300 to survive. $300 to somehow become the mother and woman she wanted to be again. The number felt painfully small. Many people would have accepted defeat at that moment. Many would have blamed fate, blamed the courts, blamed the world. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about her children. She wanted them to see a mother who kept moving forward, not a mother who surrendered. So she began searching for opportunities wherever she could find them. She looked through classified ads. She searched online listings. She spent hours reading job postings and business opportunities. Most options required money she didn't have. Others required experience she lacked. Then one evening, something unusual caught her attention. An old food truck. The advertisement was simple. The truck had been abandoned by its previous owner and needed repairs. The paint was faded. The equipment was outdated. Most people would have driven past it without a second glance. But when Emily looked at the pictures, something stirred inside her. She had always loved cooking. Family gatherings had often centered around her meals. Friends constantly praised her recipes. For the first time in months, an idea appeared. Small, fragile, almost impossible. Yet impossible did not mean impossible forever. The next day she visited the truck. Standing in front of it, she saw rust on the doors and scratches across the metal body. The truck looked forgotten, broken, left behind. In some strange way, it reminded her of herself. While others saw a piece of junk, Emily saw potential. While others saw failure, she saw a beginning. Maybe we're both waiting for a second chance. The owner agreed to sell it for a price she could somehow manage using nearly every dollar she had left. The decision terrified her. If this failed, she would have almost nothing. No backup plan. No safety net. No guarantee of success. But then came the voices of doubt. Friends questioned her decision. Relatives warned her not to do it. Some even laughed. A food truck? You've never run a business. You're risking everything. What if it doesn't work? Their words followed her everywhere. Late at night, early in the morning, during every moment of uncertainty. And honestly, their fears sounded reasonable. Who starts a business with almost no money? Who bets their future on an old truck? But Emily had learned something important during her darkest days. Sometimes waiting for perfect conditions means waiting forever. So she ignored the criticism. She signed the papers. She handed over nearly every dollar she owned. And just like that, the woman who had lost everything took the biggest risk of her life. She didn't know whether the truck would bring success or failure. She only knew she had to try, because staying where she was felt far more dangerous than moving forward. As the sun set behind the parking lot, Emily stood beside her old food truck and smiled for the first time in months. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time there was a road. The first morning Emily opened her food truck, she arrived long before sunrise. The streets were quiet. The city was still asleep. A cold breeze moved through the empty parking lot as she unlocked the truck's door and stepped inside. For a moment, she simply stood there. The small kitchen smelled of fresh paint, cleaning supplies, and nervous anticipation. This wasn't the beautiful home she once had. It wasn't the life she had imagined. But it was hers. And that meant something. Every day quickly became a test of endurance. Emily woke up before dawn. She purchased ingredients, prepared meals, cleaned equipment, drove the truck to different locations, served customers, handled payments, and stayed late into the night scrubbing every surface before finally going to sleep. There were no employees, no managers, no assistants, only Emily. 18-hour days became normal. Her hands grew sore. Her feet ached constantly. Some nights she was so exhausted that she could barely keep her eyes open. Yet every morning she returned, because she had no other choice. At first, business was painfully slow. Hours passed without a single customer. Emily would stand by the serving window watching people walk past her truck without stopping. Some barely looked in her direction. Others glanced at the menu and continued walking. The silence felt heavy. Each empty hour made her question everything. Had everyone been right? Had she made a terrible mistake? One afternoon, after waiting nearly 2 hours without a sale, Emily sat quietly inside the truck. The cash register remained almost empty. Bills were coming. Savings were gone. Fear slowly began creeping back into her heart. How long could she keep doing this? What if all this hard work still isn't enough? But life has a strange way of sending hope when people need it most. Late that afternoon, an elderly man approached the truck. He ordered a simple meal and sat nearby to eat. A few minutes later, he returned to the window. Emily braced herself for a complaint. Instead, the man smiled. "This reminds me of my wife's cooking," he said softly. "It was one of the best meals I've had in years." For the first time that day, Emily smiled. The compliment was simple, but it meant everything. The next day, the same man returned. Then he brought a friend. A week later, 2 construction workers became regular customers. Soon, a local teacher began stopping by every Friday. 1 customer turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. 10 turned into dozens. Slowly, familiar faces began appearing at the serving window. People learned her name. They asked about her day. They encouraged her when business was slow. Some customers even left extra tips after hearing a little about her story. The money helped, but the kindness helped even more. For months, Emily had felt invisible. Now people were starting to believe in her. And little by little, she started believing in herself again. The food truck was still far from successful. The road ahead remained uncertain. But every returning customer felt like proof that she was moving in the right direction. Every smile felt like confirmation that her life wasn't over. In fact, it might just be beginning. As another long day came to an end, Emily locked the truck and looked up at the evening sky. She was tired. She was struggling. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt hope. And sometimes hope is enough to keep a dream alive for one more day. Moral: small victories may seem insignificant, but they often become the foundation of extraordinary success. Months passed, and Emily continued working harder than she ever had before. Rain or sunshine, weekdays or weekends, good days and bad days, she showed up. The food truck was slowly gaining loyal customers, but success was still fragile. Some weeks were encouraging, while others left her wondering how she would pay the next bill. Yet Emily refused to quit. What she didn't know was that her life was only days away from changing forever. One busy afternoon, a young woman stopped by the truck for lunch. She ordered a meal, chatted with Emily for a few minutes, and listened as a regular customer shared a little of Emily's story. The woman seemed deeply moved. Before leaving, she pulled out her phone. She recorded a short video showing the food being prepared, smiling customers, and Emily working alone inside the truck. At the end of the clip, she added a simple message. A message about a woman who had lost everything but refused to give up. Then she uploaded the video online. Emily never even thought about it again. The next morning seemed normal. She opened the truck, prepared ingredients, checked supplies, served breakfast customers. But around midday, something strange happened. More people started arriving than usual. Then even more. Then even more. The line grew longer and longer. People who had never visited before suddenly knew her name. Many were holding their phones. Some asked for photos. Others thanked her for inspiring them. Emily looked around in confusion. What was happening? One customer finally showed her the video. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People from all over the country were sharing her story. The woman who once felt invisible had suddenly become the face of perseverance and hope. Emily stood silently staring at the screen. Her hands trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. Are all these people really talking about me? By the end of the week, the food truck became one of the busiest spots in the city. Long lines wrapped around entire blocks. Local newspapers wanted interviews. Radio stations invited her to speak. Food bloggers reviewed her menu. People traveled from neighboring towns just to try her food. For the first time since the divorce, Emily wasn't worried about survival. She was trying to keep up with demand. The same truck that once sat empty for hours was now serving hundreds of customers every day. The same people who doubted her began expressing admiration. The same voices that predicted failure suddenly praised her determination. But Emily never forgot the difficult days. She remembered every tear, every lonely night, every moment she almost gave up, because those struggles made this victory meaningful. One evening, after another record-breaking day, Emily closed the serving window and stepped outside. The parking lot was finally quiet. The last customers had gone home. She looked at the long line markings still visible on the sidewalk and felt overwhelmed. Not by pride, not by fame, but by gratitude. The journey had not been easy. The pain had been real. Yet somehow, every setback had guided her to this moment. The abandoned truck that once looked like a desperate gamble had become a symbol of possibility. And for the first time, Emily could clearly see a future bigger than she had ever imagined. A future that was only beginning. Moral: one opportunity can change your life, but only if you stay strong long enough to meet it. The viral video changed Emily's life, but it wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The crowds continued growing week after week. Customers lined up long before the food truck opened. Social media pages filled with photos of her meals, and local news stations regularly featured her story. For the first time in years, Emily had choices. She could have stayed comfortable with one successful truck. She could have enjoyed the attention and stopped pushing forward. Instead, she decided to dream bigger. Every extra dollar she earned went back into the business. She saved carefully, planned carefully, worked harder than ever. Soon, she purchased a second food truck, then a third, then another. Each new truck carried the same recipes, the same commitment to quality, and the same spirit that had helped her survive her darkest days. Employees joined the company. Many of them were people who had faced hardships of their own. Emily understood what it felt like to need a second chance. So she gave opportunities to others whenever she could. The business continued growing faster than anyone expected. Soon, managing multiple food trucks became a full-time challenge. Schedules had to be organized. Supplies had to be delivered. Employees needed training. Customers expected consistency. The responsibility was enormous. But Emily no longer felt afraid of hard work. Hard work had become her strength. Months later, she made another bold decision. She signed a lease for her first restaurant. Standing inside the empty building, she remembered the abandoned truck she had once purchased with her last $300. The contrast felt unbelievable. The woman who once worried about buying groceries was now opening a restaurant of her own. Could she really have imagined this future during those painful nights on her friend's couch? The restaurant opened to overwhelming support. Customers filled every table. Reviews were excellent. Demand remained strong. One restaurant eventually became 2, then 3, then several more. What started as a desperate attempt to survive slowly transformed into a multimillion-dollar company. Yet the achievement Emily treasured most wasn't financial. It was personal. As her life stabilized, she finally had the opportunity to spend more time with her children. The painful distance created by the divorce slowly began to heal. Weekend visits became regular traditions. Family dinners returned. Laughter returned. Conversations that once felt awkward became natural again. Her children watched their mother transform before their eyes. They saw her resilience. They saw her determination. Most importantly, they saw her refuse to quit. One evening, after closing one of her busiest restaurants, Emily sat quietly in an empty dining room. The lights reflected softly across polished tables. Employees had gone home. The noise of the day had faded. For a moment, she simply looked around. I survived the worst chapter of my life, and somehow built something beautiful from it. Tears gathered in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of gratitude, because she finally understood something important. The divorce had not destroyed her future. It had redirected it. The pain that once felt unbearable had become the foundation of her success. The woman who had once questioned her worth now walked with confidence. The woman who had once lost everything now owned more than she ever dreamed possible. But her greatest victory wasn't the money. It was becoming the person she discovered she could be. Moral: sometimes the pain that breaks your old life becomes the strength that builds your new one. Years passed. The woman who once slept on a friend's couch now owned a thriving food company worth millions of dollars. Her restaurants served thousands of customers every week. Her brand had expanded beyond the city. Business magazines wrote about her success. Entrepreneurs studied her journey. And people everywhere found inspiration in her story. But despite all the achievements, Emily remained the same woman at heart. She still remembered the fear. She still remembered the tears. She still remembered standing beside an abandoned food truck with only $300 to her name. Those memories kept her humble. One morning, Emily received an invitation she never expected. A major national television network wanted to feature her story. The producers had followed her remarkable rise from divorce and hardship to business success. They wanted millions of viewers to hear how she rebuilt her life from almost nothing. On the day of the interview, Emily walked into the studio feeling calm. Years ago, she would have been terrified. Now she carried a quiet confidence that only comes from surviving life's hardest battles. The bright studio lights shined overhead. Cameras pointed toward the stage. The audience applauded as Emily took her seat. The host smiled warmly and asked the question everyone wanted answered. How did you keep going when you lost everything? For a moment, the room became silent. Emily took a slow breath. Then she told the truth. She spoke about heartbreak. She spoke about fear. She spoke about sleeping on a couch and wondering whether her future was gone forever. She described the old truck, the empty days, the customers who showed kindness when she needed it most. And she shared the lesson that changed her life. Sometimes, she said softly, the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your comeback. The audience erupted into applause. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. As her story unfolded on the screen, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. The woman he had once underestimated had built an empire. The woman he thought would struggle without him had become a nationally recognized success story. Her restaurants, her company, her influence, her confidence, everything stood as proof of how far she had come. What must he have been thinking at that moment? For years, he had known only the version of Emily who was hurt and vulnerable. Now the entire country was seeing the version forged through resilience and determination. But surprisingly, Emily no longer cared about proving anything to him. That chapter of her life was over. The interview ended with one final question. The host asked, "If you could speak to the woman you were years ago, standing beside that old food truck, what would you tell her?" Emily smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that comes from peace. "We made it." Then she answered, "I would tell her not to give up. I would tell her that one day all the pain will make sense. And I would tell her that she's much stronger than she realizes." The audience stood and applauded. As the cameras faded and the interview came to an end, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not because she had become wealthy, not because she had become famous, but because she finally understood that her worth had never depended on what she lost. It depended on what she chose to become afterward. And in that moment, the woman who had once lost everything realized she had gained something far more valuable: herself. Moral: your greatest success is not proving others wrong. It is discovering your own strength and believing in it.